Alright, there's no time for the usual stuff, just get to the left side of the screen and start firing. When you take out all the enemies, move to the right side of the screen and do the same thing. Then move back to the left side of the screen. Continue doing this for about 5 more waves. Eventually there will be enemies coming from both sides of the screen firing at you. This is why you want to keep moving from side to side so that the shots will pass right by you. Eventually their shots will get bigger and have more of a spread, so be prepared to move around them if you have to. Alright, sorry about that interruption. Stage 4. Cherry petals have been falling from above the clouds. Does Ryo Shoden, the legendary place, really exist? Background music is the capital city of flowers in the sky. So stage 4 in Touhou is typically where the game takes a massive difficulty spike, and if that introduction was any indication, this stage is no different. This is probably one of the more brutal and longer stages in this game, which is why I think it's a really good idea to try and memorize everything that's in it, so that you know what's going to come at you before it does. This is a good time to go over a technique known as streaming, which is something that we talked about in the extra stage of Touhou 6, but it's good to review it here because it's really useful in this stage, if not necessary. There are some bullet patterns in this game that involve a lot of shots that are aimed directly at you moving very rapidly. When it does this, the game's trying to freak you out and make you move very erratically so that the bullets will cover more of the screen and be much harder to dodge. The way to correctly counter these types of patterns is to move as little as possible, and when you do move, make it very slowly and consistently, usually just by tapping one of the direction keys. This is streaming. What you're doing is basically taking advantage of the fact that all the bullets are moving at you, by minimizing the amount of area that the bullets cover, and by making it so that you can know where all the bullets are going to move to. I know it sounds really basic, but it's a really useful technique. As you can see, I'm making a lot of patterns that might seem initially difficult much easier just by streaming correctly. And that really applies to this game and a lot of Touhou games in general. A lot of the patterns seem very imposing, but are actually very easy once you calm down and focus. But anyway, here's a mid-boss, and one of the few unique mid-bosses in this game, the only other one being Cheerful from stage 1. This is the Fairy Herald of Spring, Lily White. She has a profile, but I don't have enough time to read it, so basically she's a fairy who announces when spring has come, and since she's here, that can only mean that we've finally come to a place where spring is. So the shot type that I'm using for this stage is Sakia's second shot type, Time Sign Unique type, and it really is unique because it works a little bit differently than any other shot type in this game. The way that it works is that if you move to the left or right, it'll cause your shots to pivot in either direction, allowing you to aim your shots in a way that you can't really do with any other shot type in this game. Also, if you focus while aiming, it'll cause a portion of your shots to stay in the direction that you'd aimed. As you can imagine, this can take a while to get used to, but once you do, this is a really effective shot type, and my personal favorite to use in this game. It does a lot more damage than her first shot type, and the ability to aim your shots allows you to hit enemies a lot more faster than you could otherwise, letting Sakia be even more aggressive. As you can see, I'm taking out these fairies before they're able to fire off a lot of shots, making this portion of the stage a lot easier than it would be otherwise. So, the bullet pattern that these fairies throw out can seem very fast and difficult to read at first, but once you realize that they're aim shots, you can very easily deal with them by using that streaming technique that we talked about before. All you really have to do is just move from one side of the screen to the other, and you should deal with them very easily. But like I said, even though this stage is over twice the length of any other stage beforehand and is very brutal and unforgiving, you can very easily deal with them if you know what's in it and, well, the tricks involved beforehand. Anyway, here's another mid-boss. I call another mid-boss because she drops an extra bomb when you defeat her. If that's not a mid-boss, I don't know what is. Anyway, her shots are very hard because they involve a lot of crisscrossing shots, so don't be afraid. Use a bomb if you need to avoid dying, because she does drop an extra bomb. Anyway, that's the end of this. It's onto the, oh god, just roll the dialogue. This is the Poltergeist Violinist, Lunasa Prism River, the Poltergeist Trumpeter, Merlin Prism River, and the Poltergeist Keyboardist, Lyrica Prism River. Together, they are the three Poltergeist sisters, or better known as the Prism River Sisters. Their theme is Phantom Ensemble. As a boss fight, they function similar to how Patchy worked in Touhou 6. Depending on which character you choose to play as, it will change which sister you're facing off against. If you're playing as Reimu, you'll be fighting against Lunasa. If you're playing as Marissa, you'll be facing off against Lyrica. And if you're playing as Sakia, you'll be fighting against Merlin. Now, unlike Patchy, where it changed what spell cards she used, this mainly affects what non-spells they use, as their spell cards are mainly ensemble pieces. And also, there's even a way to change which sister you're fighting against mid-fight, but we'll get to that in a bit. For now, here's what their profile says about them. Stage 4 Boss, a musical performance group as Poltergeist, noisiness times 3. They have the ability to perform with instruments without their hands or feet, times 3. The eldest sister, Lunasa, is an honor student type who excels at everything she does. She hates cheating and confronts all of her challenges with fairness and great strength. She does what she has to do, but her personality is somewhat dark on the outside. Furthermore, her honesty makes her easy to deceive. She's most skilled with stringed instruments, especially violins, and she usually prefers solo performances. The middle sister, Merlin, is an unusual type. Her magical power is the strongest, but she often slips up when using it. Her personality is overflowing with good cheer. When she picks up interest in something, she obsesses over it like a maniac. She's mostly skilled with wind instruments, trumpets in particular. The youngest sister, Lyrica, has a sly personality. She usually spurs her older sisters into battle because she doesn't like to do her own fighting. Using minimal effort for maximum gain is the only thing she's interested in. She knows herself very well and is smart. She doesn't act without thinking 3 moves ahead. She's very skilled with all kinds of instruments, but usually works with either keyboards or percussion. The 3 of them were born long ago. At that time, there was a human noble, Count Prism River. The Count had 4 daughters, whom he cherished. However, due to an unfortunate accident, the 4 daughters were orphaned. Without any other relatives, each daughter went their own separate way. The 4th daughter, Layla, was unable to leave the mansion that held so many of her memories. Using her strongest power, she conjured Poltergeist with the appearances of her older sisters, then vanished along with the mansion and the Poltergeist. Time moved on, and the death of the 4 people from those old days came to pass. The Poltergeist mansions remained in the Gensokyo. The 3 Poltergeist sisters continue their noisy lives in that mansion to this day. The musical performances given by these 3 at various places of announcement, a fusion of casual rhythm and classical instruments, are loved by the inhabitants of the cheerful netherworld. Yet, the performance itself provides no additional effect and does not heal. Here's their first spell card, Noisy Sign, Phantom Dining. I've heard of messy eaters before, but not noisy eaters. What you have to do for this spell card is move gradually to the side to avoid the arrows that are aimed directly at you, while also staying in between the gaps in the other shots. When you see that there's a break in the arrows, use this to change your direction back to the center of the screen. You might have noticed that all the sisters have hitboxes here, and you can hit any of them in order to deplete the boss's life bar. The sister that you do the most damage to will be the one that you're facing off against in the next part of this fight. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to be sticking with the same sisters throughout this fight. So, as we read in their profile, the Prism River sisters have a pretty interesting backstory. They're not actually the ghosts of the original deceased Prism River sisters, but rather magical copies made by their younger sister, Layla. This means that they're more magical spirits than ghosts, and that they're actually probably the same age, since they were probably created at the same time, and they merely act out the roles of oldest, middle, and youngest sister. And they're probably called poltergeists because of the way that they interact with their instruments without having to touch them. Their second spell card is a solo performance, and as you can imagine, it changes depending upon which sister you're facing off against. For Lunasa, this spell card is String Performance, Guarnari del Gesu. This is probably the easiest spell card of the 3. The bullets move fairly slowly and they're easy to read. The biggest threat is that they come at you from all directions, so you're gonna have to be very aware of your surroundings and cautious with your movements. For Lyrica, this spell card is Dark Keys, Fazioli Dark Performance. It's pretty easy to find the gaps in this pattern, but the part that's probably going to trip you up is when the 2 sets of bullets are crossing, so that's when you're going to want to be the most cautious on this one. And for Merlin, this spell card is Trumpet Ghost, Hino Phantasm. This one can be really hard because there's no real good strategy for this one. All you can really do is try and stay away from areas where there are large clumps of bullets and try and move to areas where the bullets are dissipating. Other than that, all you can really do is pay attention to your surroundings and try not to get boxed in. Their third spell card is Requiem, Prism Concerto. When the bullets pass through the beams that the other sisters are projecting, it'll cause them to curve and change directions, kind of like a prism. You can fight this one like a normal spell card and stay near the bottom center, but I like to get to the side and in front of one of the other sisters. I find that it makes it so that either the bullets will curve out of the way or that it'll at least make the pattern easier to read. It also makes it easier to do more consistent damage. And their final spell card is Great Requiem, Concerto Grosso. This one is very similar to their last spell card with the bullet curving effect, only this one is much more intense. I find it best to get to the center left side of the screen. This is where I find the bullets come at you most straight and it's easiest to find the paths through them. You should also keep in mind that if you have to move to the corner that you should work your way back to where you were as quickly as possible. That's the end of Stage 4. See you guys next time for Stage 5.